The smell of roasted coffee beans and expensive perfume was starting to give me a headache. Or maybe it was just the fact that I had been sitting at table 4 for 20 minutes, staring at an empty chair. The bistro was loud, a wall of chatter bouncing off the exposed brick, drowning out the jazz piping through the speakers. I checked my watch again. 7:25 p.m. The blind date my sister had set up was officially a bust. I wasn't surprised. My life lately consisted of checking load-bearing walls for stress fractures and sleeping 4 hours a night. I wasn't exactly catch material. I was in a plain gray t-shirt and jeans, the uniform of a man who lived on job sites. I'd come straight from an inspection dust, still clinging to my sleeves. I stood up to leave my knee, knocking the table leg, rattling the silverware. A waiter breezed past with a tray of martinis, and I stepped back to avoid a collision, turning blindly into the adjacent booth. I landed hard on the leather bench, directly across from a woman who was definitely not my date. She didn't look up. Her attention was buried in a stack of blueprints spread across the table, anchoring the corners with a sugar dispenser, a salt shaker, and her own elbows. She was muttering to herself a frantic, low-volume stream of consciousness. 2 weeks. I can't do it in 2 weeks. It's impossible. I started to slide out of the booth. Excuse me. I fell into your seat. My apologies. She looked up then, and I stopped moving. She had dark, heavy waves of hair falling over her shoulders and eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 years of trouble but refused to blink. She was wearing a floral dress that seemed too bright for the amount of stress radiating off her. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, but the kind that sits in your bones. She blinked, focusing on me. You're late. I paused, half standing. I'm sorry, the contractor, she said, tapping a red fingernail on the blueprint. You were supposed to be here at 7. I've been staring at this sheer wall diagram for 20 minutes, and it still looks like a roadmap to hell. Sit down. I looked at the empty table where my actual date was supposed to be. Then I looked back at her. I should have corrected her. I should have told her I was Rhodes Hernandez, structural engineer, not whoever she was waiting for. I should have walked out and gone home to my silent apartment and my microwave dinner. But I looked at the blueprint under her elbow. Even upside down, I could see the problem. The load calculation on the support beam was off by a factor of 3. If she built it that way, the roof would collapse the first time it snowed. I sat down. You're looking at the static load, I said, pointing at the paper. You need to account for the live load if you're planning on having people on that mezzanine. She stared at me, then down at the paper, then back at me. A slow flush crept up her neck. You're the guy, the one Sutton recommended. I'm Rhodes, I said. It wasn't a lie. She let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Thank God. I'm Madeline. And if you tell me this building is condemned, I'm going to cry right here in this expensive pasta sauce. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. Just a little. A tremor in her fingers as she reached for her water glass. I knew that shake. I saw it in the mirror every morning. Let me see the specs, I said. The waiter tried twice to interrupt. Madeline finally waved him off and ordered coffee like it was medicine. 2 cappuccinos arrived with tight foam spirals. The cups steamed between us. I reached for my wallet out of habit. Madeline covered my hand with her fingers, light, deliberate, then nodded toward the blueprints. Put it away, she said. You already saved my roof. I slid the wallet back, calm and unmoved. Coffee isn't a rescue. It's a truce. We spent the next hour ignoring the waiter. I pulled a pen from my pocket, I never went anywhere without a drafting pen, and started redlining the drawings. It was a mess. The venue, the ironworks, was an old industrial foundry she was trying to convert into a wedding hall and community center. The city was threatening to shut her down before she even opened. I fixed the beam calculation. I sketched a reinforcement bracket for the east wall. I showed her where the fire exits needed to be moved to meet code. I worked with the efficiency of a machine the way I always did. Cold, precise, factual. When I finally capped my pen, the bistro was emptying out. "You're good?" she said softly. She was watching my face, not the papers. "I do my job," I said, gathering the blueprints. "But this is a lot of work, Madeline. You have rot in the subfloor here, and the trusses are questionable. You're looking at $50,000 in steel alone." Her face fell. The light behind her eyes dimmed, and for a second I hated myself for being the one to snuff it out. "I don't have 50,000, she whispered. "I have considerably less." "Then you don't have a venue," I said. Blunt, that was my flaw. I didn't know how to sugarcoat physics. Gravity didn't care about your budget. She pulled the papers back toward her, her movement stiff. "Right. Well, thank you for the estimate. I assume you'll invoice me." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her knuckles turned white, gripping the table edge. She wasn't breathing. She was drowning, and I had just handed her an anchor instead of a life jacket. "I'm not the contractor," I said. She froze. "What, I'm not the guy Sutton sent?" I sat at the wrong table. My date stood me up. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I watched the realization wash over her, the embarrassment, then the anger, then the confusion. You just did an hour of structural analysis for free. I couldn't let you build that mezzanine," I said, gesturing to the drawing. "It would have killed someone." She laughed. It was a dry, fractured sound. "Well, thanks for saving a life. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go figure out how to tell my staff they're unemployed." She started to gather her things, shoving the papers into a worn leather bag. She slumped against the leather seat, the fight draining out of her shoulders like water. Small. I stood up. I should go. I had done my good deed. I had saved her from a collapse. My duty was done. But my feet didn't move. She looked up at me, pausing with her hand on her purse. Her eyes searched mine, scanning the fatigue I wore like a second skin. She didn't look away. "You're not leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "Why?" "Because you missed the stress fracture in the foundation on page 4, I said quietly. "And because I have nothing else to do tonight." She studied me, a small smile touching the corner of her mouth. "Your eyes tell me you want to stay." "My eyes are tired," I lied. "Stay," she said. "I'll buy you a coffee. And then you can tell me how to fix page 4 without $50,000. Hook strategy. C. The social friction, high empathy. The ironworks smelled like rust and old rain. It was a massive brick cathedral of industry sitting on the edge of the river, looming against the gray Midwest sky. I parked my truck next to a dumpster that was overflowing with drywall scraps. It had been 3 days since the bistro. I told myself I was just going to stop by to drop off the formal report that I'd typed up. Just a professional courtesy. I walked through the side door and immediately stopped. A man in a charcoal suit was standing in the middle of the main hall, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He was polished clean and completely out of place among the sawdust and exposed piping. Sutton Allen. I knew him by reputation. A developer who sat on the city council. He bought properties for pennies on the dollar after code enforcement bled the owners dry. Madeline was standing in front of him. She looked small in her work boots and jeans, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "The inspection is Friday." Madeline Sutton was saying, his tone smooth like oil on water. "And we both know this place is a death trap. You're out of time. Sell it to me. I'll cover the debts." "I'm not selling Sutton," she said, her voice shaking but stubborn. "This was my father's building. It's staying in the family. It's staying in the family until the city condemns it," Sutton countered, stepping closer. He invaded her space, looming over her. "You're drowning, Maddie. Let me pull you out." The air in the room changed. It wasn't physics this time. It was chemistry. Bad chemistry. I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't say a word. I just walked across the concrete floor, my boots heavy and loud. Clomp, clomp, clomp. Sutton turned, annoyed. "Who are you?" I ignored him. I walked straight to Madeline. I didn't touch her. I didn't put my arm around her. I just stood next to her. Close enough that my shoulder brushed hers. I turned my body, slightly angling myself between her and Sutton. A human shield made of flannel and bad attitude. "We're busy," I said to Sutton. My voice was low, scraping the bottom of my register. Sutton looked me up and down, sneering at my plain t-shirt and work boots. "And you are the structural engineer," I said. "And you're standing in a hard hat zone without PPE. You need to leave." Sutton laughed. "I'm a councilman. I don't need a hard hat." "You do if you don't want a lawsuit," I said. "Insurance liability, Section 402. Get out." I held his gaze. I didn't blink. I didn't posture. I just waited. I had stared down cranes that were swaying in high winds. A man in a cheap suit didn't scare me. Sutton's smile faltered. He looked at Madeline, then back at me. "Friday, Madeline. Noon." He turned and walked out, his footsteps clicking briskly. When the door slammed, Madeline let out a long, shuddering breath. She leaned back against a support column, closing her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "He was standing in a drop zone," I said, pointing up at a loose pallet on the catwalk above us. She opened her eyes and looked at me. There was relief there, but also wariness. "You came back." I typed up the report, I said, holding out a manila folder. "It outlines the priority fixes. If you focus on the fire suppression and the main egress, you might pass a temporary occupancy inspection." She took the folder, her fingers brushing mine. Her hand was warm. My skin prickled where she touched me. I pulled my hand back and shoved it into my pocket. "Roads," she said. "I can't pay you your rate. I checked what guides with your license charge. I can't afford you." "I know," I said. I looked around the empty hall. It was a wreck. But the bones were good. Solid steel rivets, old-growth timber. It wanted to stand. "I have some vacation time saved up," I said, staring at a rusty bolt on a flange. "From my firm. I need to burn it or I lose it. So I'm bored," I lied. "And I hate seeing good steel go to waste. I'll trade you." She raised an eyebrow. "Trade me what I fix your structural issues. You feed me. Feed you dinner. Real food, not microwave garbage. You used to run a catering company, right? That's what you said at the bistro." She smiled then. It started small and broke across her face like sunrise. "I make a lasagna that will make you cry." "I don't cry," I said, "but I'll take the lasagna." The next 2 weeks were a blur of dust, noise, and heat. I showed up every day at 6 a.m. before my actual job and stayed until midnight. I moved into the rhythm of the building. I wasn't the consultant in the tie anymore. I was the guy with the wrench. Madeline was there every step of the way. She wasn't the type to point and direct. She was scraping paint, hauling debris, running wire. We were working on the north wall, trying to reinforce a series of rusted brackets. I was up on a scissor lift, welding a new plate onto the beam. The sparks showered down around me, hot and bright. I finished the weld and lowered the lift. The heat in the warehouse was stifling. July in the Midwest was no joke. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. Madeline walked over with 2 bottles of water. She handed me one. "Hydrate," she ordered. I drank half the bottle in one pull. "Thanks." She was looking at the weld I'd just finished. "It's perfect," she said. "Like a row of dimes." "It'll hold," I said. "You're really good at this, Rhodes. Why do you look so miserable doing it?" I froze. I looked down at her. She was wiping grease off her cheek with a rag. "I'm not miserable," I said defensively. "You are. You carry it around like a backpack. The weight." She stepped closer. "What happened?" I looked away toward the river rolling past the windows. "I made a mistake once. A calculation error. On a parking deck." She went still. "Did it collapse?" "No." I caught it. Before the pour, but I almost missed it. If I hadn't checked it that 3rd time, 50 cars would have been in the basement. I gripped the water bottle. I promised myself I'd never miss anything again. So I check, and I check, and I don't sleep. It was the most I'd said to anyone in 5 years. Madeline didn't offer a platitude. She didn't say, but nothing happened. She just nodded. "That's why you're here," she said softly. "Because you know I missed things. And you can't stand it. I'm here because of the lasagna." I grunted. She smiled, but her eyes were sad. She reached out and touched my arm. Just a light pressure. "Rhodes, you can rest sometimes. The building isn't going to fall down if you sit for 10 minutes. "It might," I said. "Then let it fall," she said fiercely. "I'd rather the building fall than you." I looked at her, stunned. Nobody had ever put me before the work. Not my boss, not my ex, not my family. The air between us grew thin. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to lean down and taste the dust and coffee on her lips. I took a half step closer. She tilted her chin up, her eyes dropping to my mouth. Crash. A loud metallic bang echoed from the loading dock. We jumped apart. "Delivery," Madeline said, breathless. "That's the drywall." She hurried away. I stayed where I was, my heart hammering against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I looked at the weld again. It was strong. I wished I was. Friday came too fast. The inspector was a guy named Miller. He was fair but strict. Sutton Allen was there too, standing in the corner like a vulture waiting for roadkill. I walked Miller through the building. I showed him the load calcs. I showed him the fire exits. I showed him the reinforced trusses. "This is good work," Miller said, running a hand over a steel column. "Solid." We moved to the basement. This was the weak point. The foundation had some settling issues. I had installed a series of helical piers to stabilize it. It was a fix I'd designed myself, a custom job. Miller shone his flashlight into the crawl space. Helical piers. On a structure this age, it distributes the load to the bedrock, I explained. I ran the soil samples. It's the only way to do it without excavating the whole street. Miller nodded slowly. Smart. Very smart. He turned to Madeline. "I'm impressed, Ms. Ross. You've done a lot in 2 weeks. I'm signing off on the temporary occupancy. You can open for your event next week." Madeline let out a cry of joy. She threw her arms around me, hugging me tight. I stood there for a second stiff before my arms came up to wrap around her. She felt right. She felt solid. "We did it," she whispered into my neck. Sutton stepped forward, his face red. "Hold on. What about the debt lien? The city code says no permit can be issued if there are outstanding liens on the property related to utility infrastructure." Madeline pulled back. "What lien?" I paid the water bill. Sutton pulled a paper from his pocket. The storm drain assessment. From 3 years ago. Plus interest. It's a lien against the title. $12,000. Payable immediately, or the permit is void. Madeline went pale. I didn't know. My father never mentioned it. The permit is denied, Sutton said, smiling, unless you can pay it today. Madeline looked at me. Her eyes were swimming with tears. I don't have it, Rhodes. I spent every dime on the steal. I looked at Sutton. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to break his jaw. But that wouldn't fix the problem. I looked at Miller. Give us an hour. Rhodes, Madeline said. I can't ask you, you're not asking. I said, I'm buying us time. An hour, I repeated. I walked out of the building. I pulled my phone out. I called my broker. Sell the bond fund, I said. All of it, Rhodes. That's your down payment for a house. Sell it. Wire $12,000 to the city clerk. Put my name on the receipt. Now. I hung up. I stood by the river and watched the water rush by. I'd just moved my down payment into a problem Sutton created. It wasn't romance. It was leverage. If Sutton thought he could corner her with paperwork, I could answer with paperwork. But when I walked back inside and handed the stamped receipt to Sutton, seeing the look on his face, and then seeing the look on Madeline's, it was worth the risk. We celebrated that night with pizza on the floor of the main hall. The lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the freshly scrubbed floors. You shouldn't have done that, Madeline said quietly. She was tracing the pattern of the wood grain with her finger. I'll pay you back, I promise. Once the weddings start booking. I know you will, I said. I wasn't worried about the money. Why did you do it? She asked. I looked at her. The moonlight was catching the silver in her dark hair. She looked beautiful. Because you fight, I said. Most people just give up. You stood in front of that bulldozer of a man and didn't blink. I respect that. She moved closer. Is it just respect, Rhodes? I looked at her lips. No. She leaned in. I didn't step back this time. I met her halfway. Her mouth was soft, tasting of wine and tomato sauce. It was a slow kiss, tentative at first, then deeper. I put my hand on the back of her neck, my thumb stroking the pulse point. She sighed into my mouth, her hands gripping my t-shirt. For the first time in years, the noise in my head stopped. No calculations, no stress fractures, just her. We broke apart, breathing hard. She rested her forehead against mine. Stay, she whispered. I'm staying, I promised. The twist came 3 days later. I was at my actual job, sitting in a glass-walled conference room when my phone blew up. 7 missed calls from Madeline. I called her back. Rhodes, she sobbed. It's the elevator. The freight elevator. It fell. My blood turned to ice. Was anyone in it? No. Thank God. But it crashed into the basement pit. It took out the main support column for the south wall. The whole south side is sagging. Miller is back. He's red tagging the building. He says it's structurally unsound. He's shutting us down. Permanently. I dropped the phone. I ran. When I got to the ironworks, it was a crime scene. Caution tape everywhere. I found Madeline sitting on a crate outside, staring at the ground. She looked like a ghost. I checked that elevator, I said, pacing. I checked the cables. They were fine. It wasn't the cables, she said dully. Someone cut the brake line. The police found bolt cutter marks. Sutton. But it doesn't matter, she said. The damage is done. The column is sheared. The roof is sagging 3 inches. Miller says it's a total loss. He's revoking the occupancy permit. Sutton made an offer an hour ago. For the land value, I'm going to take it. No, I said. Rhodes, look at it, she screamed, standing up. It's broken. It's over. I can't fix a sheared column. I'm done. I'm tired of fighting. I can fix it, I said. Stop it. You can't save everyone. You can't save this. She pushed me away. Go home, Rhodes. Go back to your safe life. Leave me alone. She walked away toward her car. She didn't look back. I stood there looking at the sagging roofline. She was right. It was catastrophic damage. To fix it would require a crane, massive steel beams, and a crew of 20. It would take weeks. And the hearing to condemn the building was tomorrow morning. I went home. I sat in my dark apartment. I looked at my hands. The heat and steel worker. That's what I was. I fixed things. I stood up. I grabbed my keys. I drove to the construction site where my friend Andy was the foreman. Andy, I said, walking into his trailer. I need a favor. A big one. And I need the crane. I didn't sleep. I drove back to the ironworks and walked the perimeter with my flashlight. The damage wasn't an accident. The cut on the support was too clean. The cable ends were frayed in a way gravity couldn't do on its own. I called Inspector Miller. Miller, it's Rhodes, I said. The freight elevator didn't fail. Someone made it fail. A primary column is compromised and the load can kick out into the street or into the river if the wind hits it wrong. If we wait for daylight, we're gambling with public safety. There was a pause. Then Miller's voice sharpened. Don't touch anything. I'm coming. He arrived in 30 minutes with a duty sergeant behind him. Miller took one look at the sheared steel and the fresh tool marks, then turned toward me. You're saying this is an imminent hazard, he said. I'm saying the building can fail outward, I answered. And it won't ask permission first. Miller exhaled through his nose, already making calculations with his eyes. He pulled out his clipboard, wrote fast, and held the paper flat against the hood of his truck. Emergency shoring permit, he said, signing. Limited scope. Temporary stabilization only. You work under my supervision. You violate this, I shut it down, and you're done in this city. Understood, I said. Miller taped the permit to the gate where anyone could see it. The sergeant photographed the damage, the permit, the tool marks. I nodded toward the security camera perched over the loading dock. Pull the footage before it gets overwritten, I said. And check who had access tonight. If there's a truck on that feed, run the plate. While the officers handled the evidence, I called Andy. Bring the crane, I told him. Bring shoring posts and a welder who doesn't ask questions. We're not sneaking in. We're preventing an accident. By 4 a.m., the crane rolled in, escorted by a patrol car with Miller watching the entire setup like a man guarding a live wire. We shored up the roof with temporary hydraulic jacks. We cut out the damaged column. We flew in a new H-beam, guiding it down through the skylight with inches to spare. It was dangerous. It was stupid. The drawings came out razor clean, no guesswork, no missing notes, every load path annotated and cross-checked. I was on the radio guiding the crane operator. Left 2 inches. Down slow, slow, hold. I guided the beam into place. I grabbed the welder. I laid the bead myself. By 8 o'clock a.m., the column was set. The roof was level. The building was safe. I sat down on the floor, covered in soot, my hands bleeding, my eyes burning. The doors opened. Madeline walked in. She stopped. She looked at the new column. She looked at the crew packing up. She looked at me. She walked over to me slowly. She knelt down on the dirty floor. She took my hands in hers. You fixed it, she whispered. I told you, I rasped. I check my work. I don't miss things. You broke into my building. Sue me. Madeline arrived with her hair pulled back and a coat thrown over sleep clothes. She froze when she saw the patrol car, the inspector's vest, the permit taped to the gate. Her eyes snapped to me. I didn't have to explain. The evidence photos on the hood of Miller's truck did it for me. Miller cleared his throat. Ms. Lane, your building was sabotaged. We're stabilizing it under an emergency shoring permit. If you want it standing by sunrise, let him work. Madeline stepped closer. She looked at the cut steel, the staged shoring posts, the men rigging the crane with clipped professionalism. Then she lifted my hand, pressed her mouth to my dirty palm, and held it there a beat. You are the most stubborn, arrogant, wonderful man I have ever met. We have a hearing in an hour, I said, standing up and pulling her with me. Let's go tell them they can't tear it down. The city council chamber was packed. I still had grime under my nails and a fresh bruise blooming on my forearm from the night's rush work. Sutton was there, looking smug. He had a slideshow prepared about urban blight and public safety. Inspector Miller was called first. He didn't look at me for permission. He didn't need it. He set his report on the table like it weighed something. Last night, Miller said, voice carrying, I responded to an imminent public safety hazard at the ironworks. A primary support member had been deliberately cut. The freight elevator failure was consistent with tampering, not fatigue. I issued an emergency shoring permit at 12:47 a.m. and supervised temporary stabilization through dawn. Sutton shifted in his seat. Miller continued. At 7:10 a.m., I completed a follow-up inspection. Based on the emergency shoring, the weld reinforcement, and the post-repair load path verification, the structure is stable. Not barely. Stable beyond the minimum standard. He held up a packet stamped drawings, photos, and inspection notes. The council members leaned forward. For the record, Miller added the police retrieved security footage from the loading dock camera. They also recovered bolt cutters from the trunk of a vehicle connected to Mr. Sutton. The investigation is active. A low murmur rolled through the chamber. The chairman's gavel snapped it quiet. Inspector Miller, your professional conclusion. The building is safe to remain open under the conditions in my report, Miller said. I rescind the condemnation recommendation. The chairman nodded once. Then the order is lifted. The police matter is separate. Sutton opened his mouth. A uniformed officer stepped into the aisle, calm and certain. Sutton's lawyer touched his arm and whispered something fast. I stayed where I was silent, steady, watching Madeline's shoulders finally drop a fraction, like her body remembered how to breathe. The chairman looked at Miller. Inspector, if the repair holds, Miller said, I rescind the condemnation order. The gavel banged. Order rescinded. The ironworks remains open. The room erupted. Madeline let out a sob and buried her face in her hands. I walked over to her. Come on. Let's get out of here. We walked out onto the steps of City Hall. The sun was shining. You saved it, she said. You saved everything. We saved it, I corrected. She stopped on the sidewalk. People were flowing around us. She turned to face me. I can't pay you, she said again. Not for the beam, not for the crew, not for the bond. I don't want money, I said. What do you want, Rhodes? Because you've given me everything and asked for nothing. That scares me. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't an invoice. It was a partnership agreement I drafted on a napkin and then typed up at 3 a.m. I want 49%, I said. I want to be your partner. I want to handle the maintenance, the structural, the safety. You handle the events, the food, the people. I want to put my name on the deed, next to yours. She took the paper. She read it. Her hands were shaking again. Partners, she asked. Partners, I said, and I want to come home to you at night. I want to leave a light on for you when you work late. I want to eat your lasagna on Sundays. She looked up at me, tears spilling over. You want to stay? She whispered. Yeah, I said, my voice thick. I really, really want to stay. She grabbed a pen from her purse. She didn't even look around for a surface. She pressed the paper against my chest, right over my heart, and signed her name. "Deal," she said. She capped the pen and tossed it into her bag. Then she grabbed the lapels of my dirty work shirt and pulled me down. She kissed me right there on the steps of City Hall, in front of the inspector, the councilman, and the whole world. It tasted like victory. It tasted like home. "Now," she said, pulling back her eyes bright, "let's go look at that freight elevator. I have some ideas for the renovation." I groaned. "Can we sleep first?" "Nope," she said, taking my hand and pulling me toward the truck. "We have work to do, partner." I squeezed her hand. I was tired, I was broke, and I was covered in grease. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't just holding up a building. I was building a life. Relationships aren't about finding someone who fixes you. It's about finding someone who will stand in the wreckage with you and hand you a wrench. Real love is a verb. It's the showing up, the doing, and the staying when the roof caves in. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.